The Friends of Geer Cemetery request your attention. Geer Cemetery, the largest and one of the oldest African American cemeteries in Durham, lies abandoned and neglected near downtown Durham. In 1985, local Durham County historian Jean Bradley Anderson wrote to the Durham Morning Herald about Geer Cemetery. Ms. Anderson wrote about Edian Markham, who died in Durham at about age 86 in 1910. Markham, an African American, had returned to North Carolina from the North in 1869 to make his home. He purchased land and built up a church and school. Newly emancipated slaves gravitated to this place and settled nearby. This was the nucleus of what came to be Durham's Hayti. When Mr. Markham died, he was buried in Geer, or Old City Cemetery. The original deed, sold by Jesse B. Geer in 1877 for $50 to Willis Moore, John O'Daniel, and Nelson Mitchell, Geer was designated as a cemetery for the colored people from the original deed. R. Kelly Bryant, Jr. In 1986, Hampton University alum and Durham resident R. Kelly Bryant, Jr. received a request from Miss Doris Tilley for help in canvassing Geer. Mr. Bryant's great-grandmother, Margaret Ruffin Fawcett, a founding member of White Rock Baptist Church, and his grandfather, Robert Lee Poole, are among those buried there. Other distinguished citizens of this region, such as Reverend Dr. Augustus Shepard and G.W. Pearson, for whom the neighborhood Pearsontown was named in the early 1900s, are buried at this site. G.W. Pearson's son was W.G. Pearson, Hillside High's first principal and an influential and wealthy man. The accomplishments of the Friends of Geer Cemetery. In 1992, Durham Area Youth Corps Board co-chairman Mayor Wib Gully and NCCU Chancellor Emeritus Dr. Leroy Walker, former president of the U.S. Olympic Committee, working in concert with the Durham Chamber of Commerce, the Historic Preservation Society, R. Kelly Bryant, Jr., NCCU Professor Alice L.E. Jones, and others completed a cleanup and canvassing in Geer Cemetery. The 1990s. In fall 1992, when the HPSD presented 5 awards for architectural conservation, one of those awards went to Geer Cemetery. Unfortunately, sometime between 1992 and 1995, with reductions in AmeriCorps funding and the expiration of a Chamber of Commerce public-private venues demonstration grant, the Durham Service Corps went out of business. The Friends of Geer Cemetery. In 2003, the Friends of Geer Cemetery was revived. In January 2004, the City of Durham approved an initial cleanup. The city was going to maintain the cemetery on a quarterly basis by removing litter and debris, dead trees, and by suppressing weed and vine growth. Maintenance was also to be performed to keep known headstones visible. However, since then, the cemetery has fallen into further neglect and disrepair. Determining present ownership of Geer Cemetery has so far been unsuccessful. Goals. The Friends of Geer Cemetery have 3 main goals, as stated by R. Kelly Bryant, Jr. These goals are 1. To clean the underbrush and the vines out of the cemetery. 2. To put stones in place. And 3. To arrange for the maintenance of the cemetery for posterity. Geer before Beechwood. Comparing the dates of the opening of Maplewood as a whites-only cemetery in 1875 and Beechwood as a blacks-only cemetery in 1935, with the opening and closing dates of Geer Cemetery 1877 to 1944, when it was closed by the health department for being full, along with the additional data on burials. One concludes that during segregation, Geer Cemetery functioned as the unofficial Durham Black Cemetery prior to the development of Beechwood. Taxes without representation. In the period prior to Beechwood, African American city residents paid taxes to support the maintenance of a cemetery, Maplewood, that they could not use, while maintaining a large community non-denominational cemetery, Geer, at their own expense. The photo on the right is from Maplewood Cemetery. The photo on the left is from Geer Cemetery. Our request: to determine ownership, establish title and authority, and obtain a professional survey of the Geer Cemetery.